with us this evening, council members Hoey, Zoomer, Adams, Johnson. We are also, and I'm going to get started with our interim chief, Brendan Caucus. We appreciate you coming in. We wanted to make sure that we have the opportunity, and thank you to Councilmember Hoey, who chairs the Public Safety Committee that set everything up, but wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to talk with you. And we've got a couple more council members coming, it looks like. So one more. We've got Councilmember Ballerin, too. So Chief Cox, I will turn it over to you. If you don't mind just telling us, I mean, I think most of us know you. We appreciate you coming back in an interim basis. And, but if you don't mind sharing with us and the folks at home a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you hope to continue on or maybe bring back in your time here. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So it is great to be back. So for those I know and those I'm just getting back familiar with, I'm Brendan Cox. I originally served as a police officer here with the city from 1994 to 2017. I was lucky enough to work in a number of capacities in the department in that time, from patrol officer to chief of police. And I saw a lot of things during that time, and I worked with a lot of you in this room to really try to build a community partnership in that time, recognizing that there were a lot of gaps that we had, there were a lot of struggles that we had, and there was a lot of trust that we needed to build over that time. And from about 2009 to 2017, we really worked to rebuild the police department and rebuild the partnership that we needed between the police and the community and how we provided public safety. And when I say how we provided public safety, I don't mean the police department, how we provided public safety. I mean how the city as a total provided public safety, because public safety is not one-sided. Public safety can't be just provided by the police department. It has to be a true partnership between everybody and include the community and have the community have a true voice, a true place at the table, and have a say in what's happening. So that way we're not an occupying force. And that's what we used to kind of be known as prior to 2009 as an occupying force. We used to be able to show that we had crime rates that would come down based on our strategies, but the community used to tell us a lot that, well, we don't really feel part of the strategy, we don't really feel part of what's happening, and we don't feel safe because we don't feel part of the solution. So we really tried to build a partnership so we had a solution. We were able to put together a community policing platform together that helped include our beat officers, helped include communication to where we weren't just responding primarily to 911 calls, but we were actually doing prevention and education, and making sure that people understood that, you know, we have a 24-hour news cycle, people hear a lot of things, but that they also knew the positive things that were happening. And they got to know officers on a personal basis and got to know each other as individuals. Because when we know each other and we have relationships, we can solve a lot of problems. And tragedies are going to happen. That's an unfortunate part of life. We know that. We respond to tragedies. In policing, we deal with people at the worst time in their lives. And if we don't know people, if we don't have those personal relationships, if we don't build trust, then we can't serve folks in the right fashion. So we built a lot of partnerships and trust and relationships to ensure that we were ultimately addressing public safety as more of a whole and not just a component of being police in the traditional sense of police where we responded to problems and the only solution we had were handcuffs because those aren't the appropriate solution to a problem. I was lucky enough after being chief, we had one of the initiatives that we were able to bring here. That was actually a partnership with the Center for Law and Justice and Dr. Alice Green. We were able to bring law enforcement assisted diversion here, which was an opportunity to provide officers with the ability to recognize the root cause of issues around substance use disorders, mental health issues, and poverty, that when people were caught up in the criminal legal system based on those issues being the root cause, rather than continuing to arrest people, they could divert folks to services based on a harm reduction platform, get somebody a case manager, get somebody the help they need, meet somebody where they're at, and recognize that we can address something in a much different way than trying to coerce or punish somebody into trying to change, something we know that does not work, something we know that we've tried over the past 50 plus years of the war on drugs. So when we brought LEAD here, I eventually in late 2016 was provided an opportunity to work for the national organization that provides technical assistance to jurisdictions around the world to ultimately implement LEAD. So in 2017, that's when I retired and became the Director of Policing Strategies for LEAD. And for the last almost 8 years, that is what I've been doing. I've enjoyed the opportunity to be able to go around the country to some international spots and help implement LEAD, but also see what other cities, what other jurisdictions, what other police departments were implementing, and some of the struggles and barriers that they were seeing, not only in trying to do police diversion, but also in working together with their communities around providing public safety. And certainly saw over the past 8 years the different struggles that we've had as a country, whether it was the murder of George Floyd or the pandemic, and the fact that we still have a long way to coming back from those incidents and those issues. So I'm back. I'm in my second week back. I've had the opportunity to get around to the majority of Roll Falls. We're in a much different situation in the city and in the police department than when I left. There's been a lot of really great things happening over the past 8 years. I've been trying to get acclimated to a lot of the different initiatives that have been going on. I think there's a lot of great work that the women and men have been doing. I want to make sure that I continue to encourage that and continue to support that. But there's also, as you all know, and it's no secret, we have a staffing shortage. So we have to look at how do we hire, how do we retain, how do we address the workload, how do we stop forcing officers to work an immense amount of hours that's not taking into account their health and well-being, and at the same time, how do we address the issues that the community sees and that are a priority. How do we make sure that people are safe? How do we make sure people feel safe? And how do we address quality of life issues that clearly folks are looking to see? So those are some of the different issues that I see. I certainly want to make sure too that I help continue to develop, as has been developed, a leadership platform. I have a great command staff. I want to make sure I continue to build a leadership platform for the command staff and for the folks that are behind them. We have a great group of officers, the women and men of this department are second to none. They were second to none for a number of years. They're still second to none. And I believe that the next leader, the person that takes the helm of this department, should come from within and ultimately continue to lead this department in the future to great things.
Thank you so much, Chief Cox. I just want to note that we are also joined by council members Inanne and Romero, and with that we have a quorum, so we can actually ask questions if anybody has any questions. Councilmember Holy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Cox, for coming. I'll just keep it brief, and you just hit on it, is the staffing problem. I started on the council in 2018. I think we were down 60 officers. The latest count I heard, and I know there's been different numbers, 75 officers and 16 that, are either serving in the service or, doing something else or suspended. So we're down about 90, 91. So I don't, you can't pull a rabbit out of your hat. We get that. But many times we've mentioned the word partners. So I feel that this council will work with you if you come up with ideas how we can improve the staffing. Whatever we need to do, we need to do it. I'm really concerned, though, about the 911 dispatchers. I've heard that we're down to 19 out of 39, so we're less than 50%. The people are working very, very hard. And again, there, if we, temporarily maybe took away the residency requirement, maybe that would help. But I can't figure out what to do. That's really your job to come up with ideas that the council can do to help you out and the community. I mean, this is, like you said, I really like that idea that we're all working together to make the city safer. So good luck, and whatever we can do, whatever I can do, I promise you I will. Thank you.
Don, I truly, truly appreciate that. And we often focus on the officers in the police department itself and don't often think of telecommunications dispatchers. We don't think of our non-sworn, but in essence, we have to look at every part of the department, and we are short in telecommunications. There are ways to solve for workload. There are ways to solve in our non-sworn positions to also help for our sworn positions. So we need to take care of all of those. I understand that you made a statement about the residency piece. I understand the intent and the rationale of wanting city residents to be employed, work for the city, and live here. I understand that. I grew up in the city. I understand. I don't live in the city now, and I understand people might take offense to that. But at the end of the day, my expectations of the employees of the police department is that all employees, whatever job they have, is that they are part of this community no matter what. They work here. They are part of this community. They play an integral part. Where they lay their head at night isn't as important to me. What's more important to me is that we integrate them into this community while they're here and while they're working, and that they become an active part of this. And I see this every day. I saw this before I left, and I've seen it already in a week plus. That whether they're officers, dispatchers, non-sworn employees, they are dedicated to the citizens of this city. They are dedicated to the members of this city. And the intent of the residency requirement has, without a doubt, hurt the ability to hire people and to retain people. Are there other solutions to keep people within the city or to get people to move into the city after they're hired that I think can be worked on? Absolutely. To try to incentivize people to move in here and live here, that would be great. But to hire people and to get them to be here and to get acclimated, and then we should then want to get them to actually move here and live here rather than penalize them and not hire them and create that barrier. Because it is absolutely a huge barrier, especially for folks. We obviously have a large disparity of pay depending on what job you have within the police department. So depending on what job you have, the affordability also might be an issue for folks. So at the end of the day, that is something that if we can lift, there is no doubt that will be a help. Because for officers, civil service law helps that after you're hired in. So that would be a help for dispatchers and non-sworn. We were talking about dispatchers. No, no problem. Sure.
And I would just note that we're also joined by Council President Ellis and by our treasurer, Jennifer. Are there any other questions? Councilman Bernani? Oh,
This council passed a resolution a few months back, 7-point resolution around public safety and quality of life issues. The last chief didn't want to answer the question. Two questions. I'm pretty sure you haven't been able to delve into it, but social workers that are in the city budget, what type of setup would that look like under the police department? Because I don't think it's ever been done before in another city. It may have, I don't know.
It has been.
He wouldn't answer the question when I asked him, so what that look like. And two, council passed a 7-point resolution about quality of life officers. And what we're saying, what the intent is, quality of life officers are people who are not police officers in uniform who could help with, we see a number of calls our officer gets every call. Any 911 call, that's the police officer shows up. And talking to, looking at it, you know, with our numbers being down, if we had what we call quality life officers who would answer some of those non-emergency calls, that could free up a lot of our, you know, our manpower. Calls like when people need a police report, quality life officers can take that. When we see sometimes there's vagrancy, a person goes to in front of a business and they come back and officers keep coming back. Quality life officers can deal with that. Quality life officers can deal with just being on the, you know, every day in certain areas, what we call hotspots. They could be the ones that's walking there instead of our sworn officers. And so this council passed a resolution on that. The last chief did not act on it. I think his remedy was social workers. When we do know that's not the only remedy, and I think it's going to be hard for us to get social workers when the agencies who normally deal with social workers, they're having trouble getting them. So I don't know what your techniques would be to get social workers to work under a police department when other agencies can't. And your thoughts on quality life officers. Thanks.
No problem. So, as far as social workers go, my intent is absolutely to either hire internally or contract with somebody to do that. There are models that are out there that social workers work in other cities, respond to police calls, and go. And when I say respond to police calls, we're responding to calls for service that aren't police calls. Police aren't the answer to the many, many things that come in. I was just at the Central Avenue meeting yesterday. We were talking about the bus shelters. They're beautiful. Somebody sleeping in a bus shelter, it's not necessarily a police problem. That certainly is a problem that social workers should start working with somebody and figure out, you know, what is the barrier to getting this person housing? What is the barrier to getting this person treatment? What is the barrier that's happening for this individual that we have going on? My intent is to definitely having social workers, whether they're employed by the police department or whether we contract with an agency, out there being available, not just waiting until a call is coming in, but proactively addressing those issues. I agree with you, it's going to be a challenge to hire. I think that challenge is clear, otherwise there probably would already be social workers hired. There is a work shortage of social workers. My intent is to work with the county, to work with the providers that we've already been working with to do some of this work, to ensure that we can get those folks hired. I'm not opposed to the other part you talk about. Can you repeat what they're called? I apologize, because I'm not familiar. What are the other? What's the other officers called that quality of life officers? I'm not opposed to the quality of life officers. I mean, I don't know if you've heard. I mean, I've been to every roll call except for one. I'm going to the South Station Midnights Saturday night. There's not one officer at roll call that hasn't said, like, we're going to calls that, quite frankly, like, we don't need to go on. And that's not just an Albany problem, but that is our problem, right? So I'm not opposed to finding ways to figure out who else we can send, because it might not be a social worker who needs to go, or it might not be. I mean, we have online reporting now. Not everybody wants to do an online report, but at the same time, we need to make sure that folks understand why that online reporting exists. It's not because we're looking to blow anybody off. It's because we're looking to be efficient. We want people to self-report so we can follow up in a more timely fashion and so we can be more customer efficient. So we also have to be able to have a platform to where we get that message out to people and make people understand that it's not because we don't want to provide a service, it's because we want to provide a better service to them. So I'm not opposed to that at all, to the quality of life officers. I think we need to, I think there's a lot of different things we can do to provide public safety, because an armed officer doesn't always need to be the one that goes. You know, there's many cities that are doing what I'll term alternative response, which is kind of the quality of life, that have people that have training in de-escalation, that have training in mental health, that aren't necessarily even social workers, that have just a little bit different of a caliber of training. So, thank you so much.
And just a reminder that the police department, according to New York state law, cannot actually directly hire social workers, which is one of the reasons why we don't have them right now. And not that Chief Cox is right, there's not a lot of them either, so there could have also, I mean, if it was able to happen, we might not have them because there might not be enough to hire them, but the police department is not actually able to hire them according to New York state law.
But then why is it in our budget then? Why is
Because
under
it
the
was
police
put in the budget,
department? They can't hire, then why would it be under them? I don't understand that.
it was something that the administration did not realize when they put it in the budget initially.
Thank you.
But it's also, I will say, whether or not it's a direct hire or a contract, I think the intent is a good intent because the police department absolutely can contract to get those services delivered, but those are obviously two different things. Councilmember Anane had a question.
Hey, thanks, Chief Constant. Thank you for your service to the city of Albany and your willingness to come back and serve as chief. My neighborhood, we strongly believe in the Pinehills neighborhood and community police. And you know, I remember last time we were here, probably I remember like Joe Aquaviva and the rest of the crew. And since Joe Aquaviva has been gone, there's been other replacements, and they have done a phenomenal job. And just want to stress the importance of continue to have the neighborhood engagement units. I know that in the kind of neighborhood sometimes we usually have one. We used to have two, and I know it's like short staff, but we definitely want to continue to stress the importance of our neighborhood engagement community officers. My first question is, do you believe the challenges of maintaining public safety have changed in Albany since you were last chief, and how do you intend to address these challenges?
So thank you. So yes, the challenges have changed, and the challenges have changed because the times have changed, and I don't want to continue to have to go back to it. But number one is staffing. I mean, I've told a number of people in my time, in my 23 years, the biggest staffing challenge that we had was in 2012 when there was a budget crisis, and we agreed on the budget. We didn't take them out of the budget, but we agreed that we would not go to full staffing, which we're at 342 at the time. I can't remember the exact number we agreed that we would not hire, but I do remember the exact number that we were short at the time. We were 27 people that were short. That didn't count the people that were on long-term sick or on military leave. That number usually doesn't. And in that time, I was in charge of day-to-day operations, and I was the one who was kind of shuffling the manpower around, and that was a huge challenge. That wasn't 80 people, that was 27 people. And when we hired a class of 27 people, it was a huge relief. We were able to do a lot of things with our manpower, including not have to reduce any beat officers, not have to reduce those kind of services. We were able to, even in a time of budget crisis, still keep those pieces going. So that's a big challenge. That challenge is creating a crisis for our employees. I can't legitimately tell our officers that we care about them and then say, yeah, but sorry, you have to work for the next 3 weeks in a row, 16 hours a day. I can't tell them that I care about their well-being. I can't tell them I care about their home life and do that. So I got to make a change. I got to figure out how to not do that to them, which I'll work with the union. We'll come to a conclusion, and we'll figure out how to not do that to folks. Because right now we have mandates on how inversing works and dealing with staffing, and it's not acceptable. And I can't do that to the people that we're supposed to care about.
And then my second question is just more so regarding, my district, there's a lot of immigrants population that are moving into the city of Albany. If you look at the last census, many people from those communities are a little bit concerned about, Donald Trump, the president-elect's like mass deportation rhetoric. In the city of Albany, we are sanctuary city, and my question is just more so like, will you be able to advocate to maintain Albany sanctuary city and ensure that immigrants can feel safe here in the city?
Yeah, we've always had a great relationship with the immigration population. We've always worked to try to maintain that and try to ensure that everybody felt welcome and safe here. I have no intent of changing that.
And just last question, just morale within the police department. I know you just started, but just like how are they feeling just in general? Is there anything you'd like to share outside of that?
Yeah, I think that, I want to make sure that I don't come across as, I think Chief Hawkins did a great job here. I think Chief Hawkins tried his best to take care of folks, and I think he listened to folks. I think what I've tried to do over the past week plus is, much like what I tried to do before I was here, not only with officers, but I did a lot in the community, but what I've tried to do over the last week plus is really try to listen to officers and hear some of the things that they have, that they'd like to have instituted, and that they'd like to be heard about, and try to make some changes for them, and try to help build that morale. We have a dedicated group and an extremely, extremely professional group of women and men that come to work every day to help people out, and they do an amazing job doing it. And we just need to make sure that we provide them the tools, we provide them the resources, and we provide them the ability to do that. And by ability, I mean we have to be able to give them a moment to take a breath. Because at the end of the day, they deal with tragedy and crisis and trauma. And if we're not giving them the time to take a breath, we're putting them in a very bad situation.
And this is the last question, and this is something that constituents said to me, particularly when they're watching the press conference or something like Mark that you made, they thought you hit it right on the money and they just wanted to see how long you plan on staying. I don't know if that's a TMI question, but just want to throw it out there.
So I've agreed to come back for an interim period to help serve through the transition. And that's where I'm going to leave it for now. Listen, I'm dedicated to this city. This is my home. This is where I grew up. And people ask me where I'm from, where I live. I tell them all that. People sometimes remember, like, that's not where you lay your head. This is my home. This is where I'm dedicated to. This is my home.
Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming back. Thank you for coming back home. I know a lot of people are excited that you're back. You have a very good reputation in the community. I'm glad for you and for our city. I'm excited because you have a lot of experience within the city. So you know the people, you know the individuals, so you hopefully do this work on morale and build those relationships with residents and concerns. I'm also excited because you've been traveling for the last 8 years and able to see what other agencies are doing and how they're addressing some of the issues that we're facing here. Are there any best practices that you've seen in your travels that you're looking to try to implement in Albany while you're here? I I agree with my colleagues. Hope to have you as long as possible, but in that time frame, maybe like if you've seen elsewhere that's worked, would you like to implement back on that?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think there's a lot of best practices that we can implement, I think, around when it comes to alternative response. I think as we figure out this challenge of where those social workers ultimately work and how we get them out there, I think there's a lot of best practices out there about how we deploy them, what they do, how we coordinate with them, what kind of calls they go on, how they help take the workload off of the officers, how we then engage with service providers to ensure that people are getting the kind of help they need. And then, like different types of housing and how that housing is set up. So absolutely, there's definitely best practices we can apply there.
Councilmember Johnson?
Chief, I just want to say welcome back. I'm pro Albany being in control. This is one to check out Albany position. I think it's hard when you look at the city and just see the city that's being led by most people from outside of the city. I think that, as an educator, it's important that kids see people from their city and communities. I look forward to working with you. I was excited about it. Today's a new day. Welcome back.
Seeing no other questions, Chief Cox, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us, and thank you again for your willingness to serve in an interim capacity. We welcome you back and appreciate your service once again. And I neglected to introduce our staff earlier, which I will do right now. We're also joined by Alyssa Kamara, Brian Jimenez, Mika Brown, Jake Isling, and Brett Williams. I will go through the agenda. We have a public hearing. We'll start with that with Councilmember Johnson's ordinance 66-111-24. Local laws held is my local law F of 2024 on the ethics. We have two amendments that we passed through the committee. One of them was we neglected to have a function in there to vote for a chair of the ethics board, so that's included, and then there's also a training component that will be added in. And that language will be going out before, so we can all see it. The ordinance that we have, I think, important to discuss is the veto override. Councilmember Frederick from her, and I'm sure everybody read the veto message. The veto message was very much based on a second housing study, which was not what we put into the budget. What we put into the budget was something that we absolutely discussed. That is, the money initially came from a discussion of a potential second housing study, but it was also decided that housing is a huge issue and that ensuring that we have funds to go towards housing is something as a council we very much cared about, and that we thought it would be important to go through a process to decide where that money should go. Potentially it would go to a second housing study. At this stage, United Tenants, there was just a ruling in Poughkeepsie. They are no longer advocating for a second housing study. However, that funding could potentially go to something that could help housing one way or another. There's different things that we've discussed over the years. One of them was actually a program with codes to help with some emergency repairs in tenants' places, and there's a lot of different things that we've discussed. So I wanted to bring it up because obviously we'd have to vote on this on Monday and see where people were, where the body was on this. And anybody is welcome to, if anybody wants to throw their 2 cents in, they are welcome to. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Just after listening to police chief talk about the social workers, and just find out today that they can't hire social workers, but yet people have come up in this body and said, we're going to be hiring social workers, and I just feel like always things are said that are supposed to benefit the community, and then somehow they don't happen. And when I first heard about this money not going directly towards the rent study, I felt that way. I felt like it was like, okay, we got this money, and it could go to a rent study, but it could go to helping rents, and $125,000 is really not going to help a lot in terms of what people are experiencing in rents and anything dealing with housing. So I still feel strongly that it should be another rent study. I think that I don't care how many times we make reference to other cities, I think that it would be almost impossible to be 100% on your first try, especially in the way the information was received. It just left a lot of doubt that it was as accurate as maybe is needed for the time that we're dealing with. So I struggle with the wordplay, the messaging, a number of tactics that are used to avoid the issues that the city and certain parts of the city is dealing with. I don't think that is fair, and I would like to see an additional rent study. And it's not an attack on the city, it's not an attack on any individual. It's just sending a message to the people that are living in this whirlwind of rents. And and when you have people that don't have to experience that, making expert, they're talking like experts about things that they don't really have to deal with, is bothersome. So I would hope that people can open up their minds to understand why it's such a need for a second opinion when it comes to this rent study. And I understand what's going on in other places, but if we do things with fidelity, we don't have to worry about some of the things that other people are dealing with. And so we have a lot of people that come in here and voice their concerns about the process of the rent study, and they provided very valid questions to it. And so I think that we should take that in consideration when we approach this, and do what is right for sometimes for people that you may not understand. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Just to share my thoughts on it, I believe during several of our meetings I tried to explain the reasons why using this money for the second study wasn't the best idea, as to the issues that other cities did have with their study, as to then back up and reaffirm the reason why we should not use this money for that study at this current time. But I do believe that the $125, or the money that we set aside, is very much necessary and needed to go towards our housing concerns. As I mentioned before in prior meetings, there's other things that we can be addressing around the topic of housing. Besides doing a study, we can use that money to directly impact everyday residents here in our city who are having minor issues with their homes, where $5,000, $10,000, $7,000 can actually make a difference in their life and actually assist them with their homes. It's the first step in a bigger picture of realizing that we as a city need to devote more resources and money towards our housing. And again, using those resources in a variety of ways to tackle the many issues that we're dealing with. The study in itself is great, but from what we gathered and the information that we have collected on top of the legal issues there, it's best that we continue to look at other avenues as to how to address our housing needs. So for example, in that discussion or email, we see that the county is moving forward with a housing trust. It's great if we can collaborate with the county to put resources together, just like we did with the EPIC program and just like we did with several other programs and initiatives that we've seen needed the money. We've seen that it needed the attention. So I support using this money to go towards other housing initiatives and opening the floor up to discussion on what's the best ways to do so. Thank you.
Councilmember Holy, then Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you. I just have a question on procedure. We've done a couple of overrides over the years. I always thought you had to wait a meeting before you could vote on an override. Is it because this is part of the budget that you can't do it? I see you have a deadline here of 12/1.
So the budget has a very specific timeline that's like specifically enumerated in the charter. We have to do it before December 20th. So that's the requirement. It's not about the meetings. The mayor vetoed it between the last meeting and our December 20th deadline. So we have to meet that deadline. And one other thing about procedure, since you bring it up, to override the mayor's veto on the budget, you need 2/3 of the entire council. That means that there will need to be 10 people here to vote on it in favor of overriding the veto for it to pass. So I know we don't have 10 people today, so if that were the case on Monday, even if everybody voted to override, it would fail.
Thank you.
And just a reminder for council members, before I turn it over to Councilmember Ballard and Councilmember Nana, you're next, that we did say in our, within the budget, that we would, that $125,000 is something that as a council we would vote on what it would go towards. So it's not a nebulous thing, it's something that as a council we have to proactively decide where it would go towards. So just to keep that in everyone's mind with it. Councilmember Ballard?
Thank you. Two things. First, let me just right out there. I supported the second study. I still support a second study. This is something that is needed in the future. But I'm also realistic of the current circumstance. I'm also realistic that when we made the compromise for the 120 to go to housing, it was with an understanding that, we also be looking at all of our housing concerns and have a much greater look at housing and have those resources to be able to do other initiatives. At this point, I know there's been some real conversations about looking at those alternatives, and I support that. I support the idea of looking at alternative options to use those funding. So I want to urge my colleagues, who were passionate about the study, not to vote against it, not to vote against moving forward with an override because of their passion, because for that specific issue, because this funding can still go to address an issue that is needed, that needs attention, that needs resources, and I wouldn't want people to get blinded or get well, let me be very blunt. I don't want people to I don't want any of us who care and who are passionate about this issue to not put forward the best effort for us to get as much resources for this issue as possible. At the end of the day, $125,000 is an additional chunk of resources that we can put on this. And it may not be a huge amount. I mean, we don't have the dollars that the county has, but that's okay. It's still something. It's still something to put forward to it. And there's another issue I really think we need to look at outside of the housing issue. You know, I personally have some concerns with the fact that, you know, this is something that the council compromised on. We made this compromise moving forward in the budget process. And, you know, to have it vetoed after the budget process was moved forward, I think we have, if you voted for the budget, you voted for this compromise. So, if you did not believe in this compromise, then you shouldn't have voted for this budget. So, if you voted for this budget, you voted for this compromise. If you believe in finding more resources for the housing, then this is something you should be able to support. And it may not be the way you want to support it, but it's something you should be able to support. And look, budgets are never perfect. There's a lot of things in the budget that I know a lot of people didn't like. But we all supported the compromises that we moved forward. Well, most of us. Not all of us voted for this budget, and I will, you know, support the fact that not everybody did vote for this budget. We didn't get unanimous consent. But there's compromises that we all made. When we're discussing these issues, and we're having to go back and forth. And those are the compromises that we've made as we move forward. So I think when we're looking at such a critical issue that affects so many of our residents, to not put forward those resources that we already agreed on to put forward to try to address this issue would be a mistake. So I'm hoping my colleagues can look at this and say, okay, I didn't support a vacancy study. And I'm someone who did. We have differences of agreement. I can respect that. But if you believe that we're in the midst of a housing crisis, if you believe that we're in the midst of a situation where people are very vulnerable, and I know this body has done a lot of work on this issue. We've done a lot of work on this issue. So I don't want the differences that we've had about this housing study to create more wedges on what actually has been an issue we've been more united on than many other issues when it comes to trying to address the housing crisis. So I will be supporting the vote for the override, and I do hope we can get those 10 votes present here to be able to vote on it on Monday.
Councilman Bernardo, then Councilmember Sandler.
Yeah, as it relates to the $125,000, again, I think I've already said it eloquently. Those who supported the budget vote, that was part of the compromise, that we set $125,000 aside to focus on other housing issues. As someone who led, particularly when it came to a restudy of the vacancy study, at this time, it just doesn't look like we have the votes to do another study, and I don't think it's the right time. But I strongly believe, and I want to thank Councilmember Ginny during the finance meeting, to really set the money aside for other housing-related issues, because we are in a housing crisis, and this council have led on multiple occasions to address whether it's the right to counsel with EPIC, good cause eviction, a whole host of other things, inclusionary zoning, inclusionary housing. I believe firmly in this council, and I think that if we put our heads together, we can come up with a way that we could support the residents in our community when it comes to housing issues. Again, at this time, I don't believe it's the right time to do the study, the redo of the study, and this is coming from someone who was publicly about a redo of the study. I think that there's so much talent in this room, different backgrounds, and I think that if we put our heads together, we could come up with a way to spend 125K that could make a little bit of a dent. Is it going to be the end all be all for housing? No. But I firmly believe in the 15 council members and the council president to come up with something that we could utilize that 125K on to really help the residents of the city of Albany. I'll tell you this, if we have to choose between administration of Habitat or the council to address a housing issue, I think there's enough people who are on the ground talking to their constituents and understand about some of the housing crisis that we're going. I mean, just the suggestions that people have already brought. We could do a pilot, particularly with unsafe, unfit properties. We could do a pilot on emergency repairs. We could look at programs that already exist with the cares for courts. Again, so when it comes to tenants and support in housing, I think this council have demonstrated time and time again, and I believe that this is another way that we can continue to demonstrate our leadership when it comes to housing issues. So again, for those who are on the fence, like, hey, I don't want to support this override because the council might use this money for another study, you have my word that I will not support another vacancy study, that we're going to use this money for something else. Thank you.
Councilmember Zama.
Thank you. First of all, I really want to thank again the Finance Committee for coming up with this compromise. We've had, I think, a lot of discussions about those of us who didn't support the second vacancy study at this time. So I appreciate that that was a not an easy compromise for all council members. I recognize that. I do believe that the city agencies and neighborhood services did a meticulous and a phenomenal job. That's why I strongly don't support another vacancy study right now. But clearly that's not what this line is in the budget. Clearly, this 125,000 is meant to go towards other opportunities to help ease the housing crisis that's so obvious in the city. I was unsure about the vagueness of that line and whether or not our residents would support that. I know we all are really strong advocates of transparency and making sure that taxpayers know exactly where their money is going to. So I've had a lot of conversations that have reassured me, and I appreciate the fact that Councilmember Anani is saying publicly that that's not what this money is intended for a second vacancy study at this time. And I also, as we know, the county legislature just added $1 million to the budget for this very purpose. So it's not something that is that unusual. I hope that in our conversations when we decide what to do with this $125,000, that we do talk to our county counterparts. I think we could probably make it a lot stronger if we can collaborate with a much bigger budget. So again, I want to thank my colleagues for having reasonable and open conversations where I do feel everybody has been heard.
Councilmember Romero.
I also support the veto override and really applaud our county partners for putting aside a really large amount of money, $1 million, and with our 125 and their 1 million, hopefully we can come together to do a joint project. It'd be great to collaborate with them to address the housing crisis that we're in. I also look forward to working in my next role in the state level to collaborate as well. If we could do state and county and local partners, we can tackle this in a really collaborative way, and that is how we should be tackling this social crisis, by getting all of the stakeholders in the room. So while I won't be able to see it through in my role as council member, I will be supporting the veto override.
Excellent. Excellent, thank you so much. So that is something that we will have to vote on Monday. And we'll see if things go with it. Next, in ordinances introduced, we have Councilmember Johnson's Resolution 137, 122, 24R, which is authorizing a pilot agreement between the City of Albany and Capital Housing Development Fund Company and the South Mall. That is something that we'll be passing, or we'll be voting on Monday. I don't know if anybody wants to share any words about that.
Yeah, that was passed out of committee last night, a couple of recommendations, just a few small changes. Well, from the previous version of legislation, there were a number of somewhat substantial changes made, largely building out the board's powers and authorities and the procedural aspects of the board of ethics, and a few smaller changes were requested last night, revolving around the addition of some sort of training requirement for board members.
We're not talking about local law act, we're in resolutions.
You could have cut me off like 5 sentences ago.
But I guess
I was
we're
really
getting ahead
confused,
on.
I was like, I thought we were just introducing it, I don't remember.
I thought, okay.
We just really love ethics here at the lawyers. Wing.
Same.
Oh,
No,
what were we talking about then?
we're in resolutions introduced, Councilmember Johnson's resolution on the pilot and,
Okay. Right, so we are just introducing this, not passing. The pilot agreement is for the South Mall Towers, which are done on South Pearl Street. Been there for a long time. By operation of law, by the funding structure they have operated under for a number of years, they've been exempt. But they're having to change that funding structure. They're doing a number of renovations to the property. So because of this new funding structure that they're having to use, they're no longer exempt by operation of law. They are, however, owned by a housing development fund company, which makes them eligible for a pilot agreement under the private housing finance law. So they're making an application for that sort of pilot instead. They had been, even when they were exempt by operation of law, they had been making payments to the city, smaller payments, but some payments to the city instead of taxes for the provision of city services. This pilot agreement, they have indicated that they're only able to pay 5% of shelter rent. The typical agreement we like to see on these pilots is 10%. They've indicated they're capable of paying 5%. We typically do these for 30 years. They've indicated that in order to obtain funding from the lenders, they need it for 33 years. So these are judgment calls for the council to make whether the council is comfortable with a slightly lower shelter rent payment, albeit one that I think is still above what they're paying now, and whether the council is comfortable with that slightly longer term for the pilot agreement. In the memo, I think I cover some of the renovations that they're undertaking, give a general overview of the project. And they, of course, agree to make themselves available for the finance committee meeting, assuming it's referred to the finance committee. And I think I provided the, I don't see it included here, but I think I
so
provided
this
the
is
draft.
not, this is gonna be, because we have it as something that we need to vote on, so this is something that,
I mean, I'm sure they would, it is on the active calendar.
now we no longer have a plan. Let me get there.
It is on the active calendar. That's for the council. I mean, if the council is comfortable with moving forward on it, that's fine. That's not my fault.
Well, DJ?
So I know I met with them a couple of weeks ago, and they're dealing with a time crunch. So I know I came to you a couple of meetings ago, and you said it had to go through the county.
Had to go through the
County planning, I believe, before it got to us.
I believe you're thinking about 31 Trinity Place. That one we are having a public hearing that day, and I believe is also.
Yeah, I believe we found that the planning board had actually taken Trinity Place there already. But we can talk after about exactly where that is and what the timeline is on that.
As far as I'm aware, pilot agreements don't require referral to the county planning board. Yeah, right. Just to clarify that, it's a pilot agreement. I don't think those do go to county planning.
But just on behalf of the Second Ward, we have seen in the city and other parts of the city where these pilots didn't happen, and then we've seen what happened afterwards from the people that live in those establishments. And just for 99 and 101, they play a vital role for our seniors, and just I invite everybody to come down here. If you want to see something that's going on good in the South End, in the Second Ward, come down to 99 and 101 and see the operation that Kim and her team is running. You know, we hear people come in and with their concerns about the seniors where they're living at, and all over the city there's huge concerns, and that is something that we don't have down at 99 and 101. So I would be in full support of supporting this moving forward. And remember that they are dealing with a time. I don't know what the time crunch is, but I know I met with the president of the board and two members of the board as recently as 3 weeks ago, and they were hoping that this went through as fast as it could. Thank you.
For what it's worth, I have been exchanging emails with the South Mall Towers people, and I made them aware as recently as last week that it would go to the finance committee. Again, that's totally the council's prerogative. Ask that the committee referral if you want to. I'm sure they'll be happy with that, but they are at least aware that referral is likely.
I mean, I personally don't have an issue with it. I generally like to have pilot.
Also, I don't think we need to worry too much, because if we do decide later that it is urgent, even if we determine to refer it, we can withdraw it from the committee, or if we decide to hold, we can later send it to committee.
So we'll be referring that differently. The next resolution, Councilmember Romero's resolution 138, 122, 24R, which is a resolution declaring Washington Park Playground project and issuing a negative declaration. At this stage, that's going to be an intro and hold. We're waiting for a few more documents. If we have them by Monday, we'll pass it. If not, it'll be ready to go the second that they have all of the documents needed. Next, we have Councilmember Anane's resolution 139, 122, 24R. That's a resolution of the common council declaring our intent to act as lead agency for a secret review and declaring it a type 1 action. And that is something we are passing, or?
Yeah, I think, it comes from Jake's side of things, but I believe we can pass that one without.
So that one is something that we will be voting on Monday. And then finally, Councilmember Adams' resolution 140, 122, 24R, a resolution of the Common Council celebrating New Albany men's basketball team reaching the Albany Cup. Is that, and Councilmember Johnson, if you could not leave, just because we have one more discussion thing, and if we lose any council members we can't discuss, it would be really great. Councilmember Adams, is this something you'd like to have us move forward, like shift to the beginning of the meeting? Will they be coming in?
yes, they confirmed that they would be coming. We can do that publicly.
Okay, and council members that would like to be co-sponsors on this? I'm assuming that we'll all be co-sponsors on this. So next we have and I guess we have an MC, if Councilmember Romero.
So there's a bond ordinance right now that's sitting in the Finance Committee that is tied to state funding related to the playground, specifically the Washington Park playground. And it's required that we pass this before the end of the year so that we can ensure that the state funding is passed and confirmed. The city funding needs to be confirmed in order for the state funding to go through. And so we need a 2/3 passage in order to pull the bond ordinance out of the Finance Committee and pass it on Monday. I do have Martin Daly and another Sarah Reed from the Washington Park Conservancy to talk a little bit more about the Washington Park Playground project. I don't know if
Actually, I have a question because I personally don't love, because it's not just Washington Park. It's a lot of playground things that we did have further questions on as a finance committee. Is it possible that we can pass just the bond, like can we do a new one with just this funds? Because I don't love passing the entire thing, because
If you're asking if we could, you see a new ordinance and pass
if
it.
this is something that has to pass before the end of the year, it was not, what was holding up, like and first of all, nothing was holding anything up with our bonds. We always pass our bonds in January, so this is the totally normal timeline that we do. But when we did discuss the playground, we did have further questions about several different pieces of it because it was not just Washington Park, there were other playgrounds involved. And I'm not comfortable passing that entire bonding through because it's not just Washington Park.
Yeah, I guess 2 points. One is, maybe Martin can correct me if I'm wrong here. The bond doesn't necessarily need to be passed by the end of the year, does it? Or, yeah, actually,
But the bond will be going out the same time as all the other bonds, which is none of them, like they all get passed in January. I guess I don't understand what is it with state funding that,
my understanding is that the bond needs to be passed before the end of the year and towards the dormitory authority money.
that it won't be. Like so we go out with all of our bonds at the same time. It won't be going out before the end of the year. It's not possible. Just come on up. I mean, come on up, guys.
Yeah.
What
get
is
in
it?
here.
So I mean, backing up to answer your question, I mean, procedurally, Councilmember Farrelly, yeah, I guess we could UC, MC, and pass broken out bond ordinance on Monday. We would have to, work out with the budget director what the numbers on that would look like, but maybe Martin will help us answer the question of whether we need to do that or not.
I'll be quick and hopefully concise, and I think we give everybody a good understanding where we are on this project without going into the history of the project. We do have 2 grants for the project. One is through the Environmental Protection Fund for roughly $400,000. We're under contract with that. We have another grant thanks to Assemblymember Fahey's office, which is approximately $250,000. That is administered through DASNY. DASNY requires 2 things, among all the mountain of other things that we are still working to connect on. One is the seeker process to be completed. Thank you. The second element is they want to see that the project has the financing secured, our bonding, so that they can get under contract. Now, I don't want to delay that project, but I don't believe there's anything statutorily that says we have to have the bonding inked by January. But I don't want that to give anybody a sense of we can continue to discuss this project ad nauseum and how to change it, because we want to be able to get under construction. We want to be able to bid this project out in January so we can get a contractor on board in March when the ground thaws and build the project. So Yes, it is totally okay if January 6th you would like to ink the bond and all the projects together. But please don't lose sight of this project and its sensitive timeline.
But
That,
and I'm sorry.
go ahead. And it,
The point is that I don't want to reintroduce the funding when I become the Assembly member. Assembly member Fahey has introduced the funding and secured it. And the point is that she's on her way out. And I'd like to pass the bond ordinance this year so that she can complete her funding by the end of this year. You can secure the bond ordinance this year, have it be done, and complete the rest of her submission this year with the bond ordinance passed. Provide this with her packet of information, submit it to DASNY and say that this is my completion of the paperwork. This is the completed bond ordinance from the city, the requirement of the city's section of the funding. But I don't have to resubmit my paperwork next year.
But here's the problem, is that what they're looking for is not a bond ordinance from us. What they're looking for is the actual bond. That will not be done until January. So regardless of what we do, you're gonna have to do the same thing all over. So it's not, the city is not going to be putting out their bonds until the end of January. That's when they do it every year. Like, so it doesn't matter when, I mean, I'm happy to.
So, I guess my question has been, so, the council acts, right? DASNY would take, I mean, if the council voted on that particular bond, they know, okay, the council passed it, so it's gonna be coming sometime. It might not be to December, but it'll be in January sometime. They know that it's coming, right?
If DASNY, but that's not what DASNY is looking for.
Oh,
They're
you think
looking
they're
for
looking
the
for the
actual
bond.
bond. They want
Yeah.
the bond in place.
they don't want to execute a grant with us saying, well, we will get the money eventually.
Yeah, like they're not looking for like, hey, yeah, we like it. They're looking for the actual money, which that will not be happening before the end of the year, no matter what we do. Like we can all like we could shift all of our meetings to Washington Park and like sing songs about it, and that will not make any change. Although it'd be fun. Councilmember Nani?
Thank you. As the chair of Parks and Recreation, and this is something that is really, the mayor and I have really worked hard to make sure that we improve all our parks all across our city. For me, I think that if there are so many unknowns, I don't see the harm of trying to get it passed at our next meeting. I fully support what Councilmember Farr was saying as relates to if we could separate the bond for Washington Park, because we should not risk losing state funding for a project in Washington Park or any of our parks. I've always, we have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the taxpayer dollars in our city. But we also have to keep in mind, if we are receiving state or federal dollars, we shouldn't risk losing that money moving forward. So if we can separate the Washington Park bond from all the other parks for further discussion, that's something that I would totally support, so we could get it out the way. I don't want it to leave it to so many unknowns or questionable or misinterpretation. And if we have a misinterpretation, there's other people. So the best thing I believe is to separate the bond, Washington Park bond, and move it out of committee, move it for a vote and for the full council. Thank you.
So I personally, I don't have a problem with passing this through. I just will note that the bond will not be done. If it's something that will ease people's hearts and minds, I love easing hearts and minds. But I think that I just, as a side note, Sarah Reed, who's here, and Martin, I know, like, the work that's been done on the playground is incredible. It's been a beautiful public process, and we appreciate all the work that you've done. Councilmember Romero as well, like this is, and Councilmember Nani as chairperson. But it's been a beautiful project, and it's definitely been something that's been going on for years. We appreciate it. We certainly do not want to hold it up. But I guess that I also procedurally don't love passing through bond ordinances that haven't been fully gone through the finance committee. So it would be my preference, if we're going to pass it, to pull this part out of it.
Unanimous consent in this
Yeah,
case?
we would need unanimous consent.
Yeah, we'd need unanimous if we're going to be dividing it into two, because then we would have to be introducing and passing an ordinance the same day that it's introduced. I don't think we would need unanimous, with passing,
If we're breaking off the Washington Park portion, then we would need majority consent to put on the agenda and unanimous consent to pass it the same day it's introduced.
Okay.
That's only if we're breaking off creating a new ordinance by breaking off the Washington Park portion.
Okay.
Well, if I may, if what you're saying is true, because the information that I received was that it is in fact quite literally time sensitive, and it is quite literally a requirement. I will go back and I will quadruple check, but I don't think, for many reasons that I don't want to get into publicly, I don't think we'll get unanimous consent. We can try, but I don't want to get into this right now. I think we can look into that as an option, and maybe we can be prepared for that. But also, we can look into all options about what's available on Monday. And let me quadruple check.
Councilmember Ballerin?
I guess I would ask staff, who's on staff, to look at all of the options, to make sure we do this as efficiently as possible. I wouldn't want to risk losing any funding. And I say that quite honestly. I wouldn't want to risk it. So if it's something that we're going to pass, we're going to split it or put it in one package. I'm going to put it on staff to figure that out. The legal eagles, as I like to call you, to figure out what needs to be done, to work with our colleagues here to make sure we can do it in an efficient manner, but also make sure we don't risk any funding. And I also do agree with the idea of if this was something that Assemblywoman Fay had been working on for so long, it should be packaged as part of her package. And if I'm hearing that correctly from Councilman Romero, that it will allow her to close out what she's trying to get funding from for the state. Under her administration, I think that that's fair as well, because she put a lot of work into it. I know she's going to continue to work for our city, but I think if we can give her her ability to close it out, we should. So, thank you, staff, and my colleagues.
Okay, so we will see what happens with that. We may have an MC, we may be looking to move forward in bonding ordinance, we may be fine. But let's keep Washington Park Playground in our minds and expect some sort of discussion about it on Monday. And let's think of it with a positive light so that we can keep moving forward, enriching our playgrounds, especially ones that go through such an exhaustive public process. With that, I know that several council members are anxious to leave, so
If I may, just one
one last thing
tiny little
from
thing.
Brian.
Just to go back to Councilmember Johnson's statements regarding Trinity Place. I noticed that the ordinance regarding it was not listed on the active calendar. We will be having a public hearing that day, and it already went through County Planning Board. I found that out from the Planning Department. So theoretically, we could have a vote on it that same day. If the council wishes, we can make sure that's on the active calendar.
I would say yes, as long as it's okay with Councilmember Johnson. Would you like us to pass that? Then let's also expect to pass ordinance, or to vote on ordinance 66-111-24 that we'll be having a hearing on that day. Thank you so much, Brian. And with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
All right, cool.